Öncesinde bir keynote speech'imiz olacak yine. Değerli bir konuğumuz var. Hemen anons edelim ve başlayalım. Shanahan, Frost & Sullivan, Tarım ve Beslenme Global Direktörü, Mega Trendler ve Türk gıda ve içecek üreticileri için öneriler başlıklı sunumunu yapacak. Şimdi alkışlarınızla Shanahan'ı sahneye davet ediyorum. Buyurun.
Well, everyone, hello. My name's Christopher Shanahan. You can call me Chris. First of all, I'd like to thank the summit for a wonderful lunch. I was invited here today let's get this working. Just want to make sure that we're technically, all right. Thank you. I'm Christopher Shanahan. You could call me Chris, and I'm with a company called Frost & Sullivan. We're a business intelligence company. Today I'll quickly talk about ourselves, but then we'll dive right into the big mega trends that I personally have been tracking for over a decade, and talk about the implications in terms of specific growth opportunities that we've identified across the entire agriculture and nutrition value chain. And then I'll have some final thoughts. If there's any desire for Q&A, we can also proceed in that way as well. Sorry about that. Still having slight after lunch. Well, as we try to fix this might be a great opportunity to introduce who we are quickly. Frost & Sullivan, as I stated, is a business intelligence company. We've been around since 1961, first in the United States, but we quickly went to India, United Kingdom, and we have over 40 offices throughout the world, plus other remote sites, and have well over 1,000 consultants and analysts tracking a wide number of industries, from automotive to healthcare to information technologies, and also agriculture nutrition value chain. And what do I mean by agriculture and nutrition value chain? Well, I know everyone in the room has heard this before, but I like to say that we track all the markets, all the industries from before the farm all the way to the fork, or just before the fork. And that includes everything from agricultural inputs, including fertilizers and crop protection chemicals and seeds and traits, to processed crops, into very specialty ingredients, and we'll talk more about that later today. And also enabling food and agriculture technologies, specific technologies that enables and addresses the challenges within the entire agriculture and nutrition value chain. What do I mean by the agriculture and nutrition value chain in more detail? Well, it might be a little bit difficult to see this here, but this is a value chain from pre-farm all the way to the consumer. And each of these nodes are different sectors that we track at Frost & Sullivan. And they're all being impacted by these external drivers, these external trends, including sustainability, the demand and need for food security and safety, the changing dynamics in terms of globalization and changing economic conditions, and what does that mean in terms of the demand and supply of certain food and beverage products, and of course, the rising demand for health and wellness. If you were to take the sum of all of these industry sectors and look at their contribution in terms of revenue and sales, we're talking about over 25 trillion US dollars in terms of economic impact in the world. That is 1/4 to slightly less than 1/3 of the total global economy has some touch points within the agriculture nutrition value chain. So I like to think of this as well, it's a little hard to call it a microcosm of the entire economy, but because it's such a big set, but it is really reflective of, if you think of all the economic, political, social trends that impacts the economy as a whole, there is going to be an analog within this industry value chain in this sector. Zeroing in from that 25 trillion, just for some guidance, I like to talk about numbers. I'm a statistician, econometrician, economist, all of those things under one. So I really like data. So I felt that let's throw some data at you. Globally, in the United States, of that 25 trillion, 4.6 trillion is attributed to processed food and beverage products. So these are products that goes through processors, puts in packaging, and goes to grocery store shelves, which if you think about it, you would expect it to be a lot bigger than that 25 trillion cumulative value. But in fact, with all the fresh food, all of the informal markets that occurs throughout the world, and especially in developing countries, it only makes up about 1/5 of the total value, or a little less than that, in fact. This market, processed food globally, is growing at a compound annual growth year on year, about 1 to 2% per year. We expect it to average about 1.5% through the forecast period to 2025. And let's see, it does work. All right. The beverage category is a significantly growing segment of that. Growth is twice as much in the beverage sector, and that includes both, or all hot beverages, soft drinks, and alcoholic beverages in one. And for knowledge, CFPG, you can't see it from here, but that stands for canned, frozen, and perishable groceries, what we call the center of the store. And that's a 17.4% share of the total market. But surprisingly, it's shrinking because people throughout the world are demanding a little bit less processed foods, a little bit more and more. So this piece of the pie is shrinking as we would expect, given the trends for cleaner food, healthier food, more sustainable food, and et cetera. The great thing about Frost & Sullivan is that we look at very specific data. We also have some market statistics to share with you on the food and beverage processed food market in Turkey. Let's see, move that on the way. Total packaged food, total food and beverage. And pardon me if I mispronounce any of this. It's 192, how do you say that? Oh, it's 192.23 trillion, or billion rather, sorry. I'm still trying to get the exchange right. 192.2 trillion lira. And that's growing at a compound annual growth rate of 11%. So the processed food industry within Turkey is growing significantly greater than the global average as well, at least through 2021. The biggest segment, of course, is total processed food, which we'll share a pie in a bit, which is 146. And the beverage category, which we divide into hot drinks, soft drinks, and alcoholic drinks, is, as you could tell here, is the fastest growing parts of that market. Let's see, over there. And we actually provided more details, and of course I'd be happy to share this document with the participants here. Turkey today has 20% of all beverage sales is attributed to beer sales, but the fastest growing segment is coffee. We're seeing significant growth in the coffee category within Target, followed by tea. And then all of the other beverages, soft drinks, et cetera, follows closely behind in terms of growth. In terms of the processed food, which is the pie on the right, baked goods make up an overwhelming 47% of the market. And this includes cereals and finished bakery goods and products. So the whole gamut. So that's actually a significantly greater share than a lot of your peers throughout Europe and the United States, where you see a lot higher levels of fat consumption, a lot higher levels of meat consumption, dairy consumption rates are higher, and also sweets and desserts, which are represented here. So very interesting findings there. In terms of the distribution of what's on the shelves within Turkey. But whether I'm talking about Turkey or whether I'm talking about any other country in the world, our team has identified 3 key megatrends or aggregated trends that really is impacting the entire global food and beverage industry as an aggregate. And we cluster it into these 3 spheres. First, of course, socioeconomic environment. What do I mean by that? Well, we all know that food is consumed by people and animals. And essentially, we really have to understand what is the social and economic conditions of the main consumers of food, because that's a significant determinant to what we eat. And also included in socioeconomics is, variables includes population dynamics and growth, income dynamics and distribution, the distribution of how much of your income is going toward food or food production. All of that has a significant impact. And while we're trying to, and if you think of the farmer, you think of the food producer who's increasingly trying to address an ever-changing and ever-complex demand user profile, who wants cleaner food, who wants more sustainable food, less processed, less additives. The challenge is becoming increasingly more difficult for industry chain participants in terms of delivering a food product that is sustainable and is also mindful of the resources available and to make that food product. So resource efficiency is really critical, and probably none of these trends are ranked. Some are more important than others, but I think resource efficiency and sustainability really ranks up there in terms of the top of mind trend that impacts all industry participants throughout the value chain. And underlining all that, of course, is the demand. We all know that for food and beverage, the demand for anything we see on the shelf is driven by consumer choice, by the taste and preferences of you and me and everyone in the room and everyone throughout the world. And what we're finding, independent of where you're at in the world, everyone wants cleaner food, sustainable food, food security, food that's produced ethically, using that keeps in mind social values, economic values, environmental values. And as consumers demand these trends, what we'll find is farmers' jobs get harder. They have traditional production processes. They use inputs of production that is, sometimes may not be, easy to attribute it to being clean. So therefore, they must change, and change costs money, and it hurts. So that creates bottlenecks in the system as well, and that can impact food prices and a lot of volatility in the industry and the value chain as well. These are all trends that we look at. But at Frost & Sullivan, change and pain is actually the root of innovation. That's where we see enabling technologies come into play to help farmers, to help food processors, to help logistic companies and retailers and even consumers optimize their production or consumption needs as it relates to the food and beverage market. I'm going to hit on some of these trends. I've already talked a little bit about freedom food. What I like about this is this term, sometimes we call it freedom food. Sometimes you might hear free from food in different markets or different countries. But basically, I like to think of it as 4 key domains of specialty food categories or claims, labeling claims that are typically made on any food and beverage product. Food that wants to demonstrate that it's healthy, and we'll get to healthy in a little bit more on the next slide. Food that's green, and what we mean is it using a raw materials or biomass that is sustainably grown and sourced, using best practices, on the farm, or is shipped and processed, through that value chain to get to the plate. Safety, of course, is critical. Is the food safe to eat? And also, is it safe for the environment in which it's grown and produced? And also safe for stakeholders, third-party stakeholders who live by the farm, who live by the processing plant. Is it safe for them as well? And of course, ethical is closely related to that as well. I like this chart right here. It's a little old. We need to update this because I expect it to be much bigger, but the conventional part is really any food and beverage product that is not being labeled with a quality enhancing claim, whether it's healthy or safer or greener. It's 86%, but shrinking at a significant rate, exponentially, in fact. Where we see a lot of growth is in vegetable-based meat alternative market, so vegan and vegetarian meat products. That's where we see the greatest growth in this pie. Organic and natural is also a good share of the market. We still see some growth in that area, a little bit slower than we did witness about 10 years ago. Other quality labels, including fair trade, rainforest, and other food or freedom food labels, is growing at a little bit lesser rate as well. But we're most excited about the vegetarian meat alternatives market. A lot of innovation, a lot of demand for proteins grown from the ground. But it's a bit more challenging. I'm sure many of you in the audience would recognize that. Oh, that is not my slide. All right, let's see if I can jump ahead. I pushed the escape button, right? There we go. Let me focus a little bit on health and nutraceuticals. I actually at Frost Sullivan and personally myself, we do a lot of work in this area. And a nutraceutical, I'm sure I don't need to define it in too much detail, is really it's not quite a food product. But it's not quite a pharmaceutical product either. But that really depends on which country you're in. It's really this overlap of where we find functional foods or medical foods or dietary supplements or food supplements. And really what that is, how we define a nutraceutical is really a food and beverage-based product that is delivered in a food and beverage or pharmaceutical-like delivery mode of action that delivers a health benefit beyond nutrition. So that includes omega-3s to fight triglyceride levels or cholesterol or blood pressure rather, or psyllium fiber to help fight LDL cholesterol levels or other prebiotic benefits as well. And we'll talk more about that. This market is a very attractive subset of the total food and beverage ingredients market. Right now, we're estimating a global market of 5.4% growth against and this is nutraceuticals, so this is finished product, 156 billion by 2020, so it's a little less than that, maybe 145 billion US dollars today. The majority of that is in functional foods, so food and beverage products that have added ingredients or added nutrition that uses a nutritional claim, and that can be backed by some set of scientific research. But increasingly, more and more, a lot of the common, especially in parts of Western Europe and the United States, of course, dietary supplements is a much greater segment of growth, and that's capsule or tablet based. A lot of this growth is really related to and we talked about it, so I don't need to dwell much more, but the aging of the world, especially the Western economies. Here we see by 2030, 22% of the market, of the global population rather, not the market, but the global population is 55 or older. Nearly a quarter of the world's population will be over the age of 55. And that's significantly bigger than what it is by 2020. And it's just amazing in those 10 years, the rate of change in the population pyramid. It's really getting skewed out. And that has a lot, and we talked about this already this morning, it has a lot of a lot of consequences. Growing cost of healthcare. I forgot the speaker, but we live in a world where we're living longer, but we're more obese and less healthy, which means we're going to have a greater burden on our healthcare systems, meaning that we're going to have to try to find a better means to prevent these events from occurring. Of course, there's also shrinking incomes and personal savings. As you grow older, you're extracting wealth. You're not reinvesting. You're not able to pass it on to your descendants because you're utilizing that income and wealth to live longer and maintain a certain level of quality of life. These are all states that are not desired. And also, and I'll quickly go through this slide as well. Turkey is among well, I guess among a group that's not necessarily a good group to belong to, but this is the number of DALYs, disability adjusted life years that are lost because of cardiovascular disease, which is just one non-communicable disease that we talked about today that directly impacts the demand for treatment, healthcare cost. So I bring all this up is because there's a lot of burden, health burden in the market or in the population today, which means that any solution that can support in preventing some of these events from occurring cost effectively should see significant growth. And we've seen a lot of this occur in past. We've seen this happen with the omega-3 market over the last 10 years, which went from near zero to a $2 billion ingredient market size in 10 years because of its health benefits as it relates to LDL cholesterol reduction, or rather triglyceride level reduction, or blood pressure, et cetera. So that's just one example. So we do a lot of this type of work at Sullivan too, is really trying to, what is that service, that addressable market? And, in terms of nutrition, it's really, especially when it comes to health and wellness, it's like, what is the value of the burden of disease? And what proportion of that can we help eliminate in the future? And that's the addressable market that's available for ingredient producers as well, who have certain food products that could potentially, with scientific backing, demonstrate efficacy to help prevent some of these undesired benefit or undesired events. One way, the challenge though, actually, to tracking all this, especially for a large global population of 7 billion people, is monitoring. I know that the doctor this morning talked about self-monitoring as a significant, effective way of helping reduce weight, and actually in turn lead to other health benefits as well. But he also noted that it's very difficult to self-monitor, and that's really where nutrigenomics and personalized nutrition comes into play. And this is where the convergence of technologies, the use of sensors, the use of information communication technologies, and big data to tie that all together to support me and you who have trouble self-monitoring, help eliminate some of that burden ourselves and still get these benefits as well as a way. We see a lot of interesting models in the market today, whether it's wearables or sensor patches that are communicated, being tied directly to centralized warehouses where there are people, nutritionists, who are able to customize specialty meals for those with certain genetic or health makeups. There's many examples, and we'll share those a bit later. But it's really interesting that this is really where we see the work. And big companies, Nestle, Samson, many big ingredient companies, big nutraceutical companies are all in this game right now, looking for that optimal way to get into that marketplace. And nutrition is not the only means of which this convergence of technology with food and beverage can be beneficial for the industry participants as a whole. If you take a step back, big data is useful for anyone along the value chain. If farmers had the ability to learn about what consumers want, they may be able to better plan for the next year's harvest and grow the right crops. They may be able to better partner with other farmers or other co-ops to produce what consumers really want based on their feedback, whether it's through the monitoring systems or through cell phone apps or through surveys, et cetera. The industry participants in the middle also, value this big data, not just from the consumer, but also from the farmer, in order for them to optimize the number of units of milk or ice cream or whatever food product that they can produce so they can minimize waste. We are living in an era where we are finally closing the loop of the circular economy. In all process manufacturing, whether it's food and beverage, whether it's chemicals or materials, oil and gas or energy, there's a lot of leaks in that system. and monitoring where those leaks are and how to close it up optimally and efficiently, and to reduce waste and the production of negative externalities is critical for all industry participants in order to optimize this system. And we're finally getting to that point to where we have the processing power, the data storage capacity, and the ability to analyze, the mathematics, the logic, to really put this together for benefits for all the industry participants throughout this value chain. It's also changing business models. I'll be honest, this is my first time in Turkey. So far, it's been wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be here long enough to experience. Everyone's telling me to go to Istanbul, so I'll have to come next time. So I don't know the degree of impact that this trend is having in Turkey, but I can tell you that if it's not already here, it's coming. And that is new business models. Because we're all connected now, the major winners of this industry, of the food and beverage, of delivering food and beverage products to consumers is changing. Grocery store owners are decreasingly losing bargaining power, increasing competition from the likes of the Amazons of the world, who are, and there's other models as well, who can deliver food faster and straight to your door. And not only deliver food that you want, but also pre-package, ready to make meals, meal kits, based on, whatever cuisine your heart's desire. These are big trends that's happening in the United States, where I'm not a millennial, but folks like me and millennials, we've shifted our food budget. Up to 1/4 of our food budgets are being used in these new business models of delivering food to the door, or through meal kit designs, or subscription-based models. And food companies, or specifically retailers, are not able to keep up. And even food companies are suffering from this. I talked about that center of the store, the canned, the perishable, the packaged food producers. They are not able to effectively brand in this changing dynamic, because the Amazons have their private label, or if you put it all in a cardboard box, the meaning of labels and the meaning of those brands are diminished. And it's a lot harder for the producers to manage this system. So they're all, the industry as a whole globally is really looking for new ways to take those brands to the new era. Yeah. I did talk about this a lot, and this is actually one of my favorite topics, and that's, again, the circular economy, the production of food waste. There's a lot of food waste produced in the world, and I'll get to a slide on this. And it's produced at all levels of the value chain, including us, at lunch as well. Farmers produce a lot of food, but they're not able to close those gaps, close those leaks to minimize waste. And food producers, logistic companies, and there's a lot of solutions, whether there's byproducts or customers coming to buy excess cereal for animal feed, or for producing white chemicals or energy. A lot of technologies, but it's still not optimized. So there's still a lot of production of waste. And in fact, and I like this chart, I didn't make this chart, but the amount of waste that is produced by those levels of the value chain, that we introduced before. This is the initial quantity of food: dairy, fish, meat, fruit, vegetables, oil crops and beans like soybeans and canola, roots and tubers, potatoes and turnips and grains. There's a lot produced, a lot of fruit and vegetables. But as you go down the value chain, all of those squiggly spaghetti lines is waste. Those are waste streams. Some of that waste is lost for good in landfills. It just rots. It's gone. Some of it is used in the production of energy, like I said, waste to energy, but not a lot of it. Some are used to make chemicals or other products, but most of it's still landfilled, or just lost in the process, or just dumped in the, in the ground or the air or the sea. Fruits and vegetables is significant. And it's all related. You could see, you could see the correlation is related to its perishability, its ability to be shipped from one part of the world to the next, and the amount of loss. But even so, I mean, us, the consumers, are wasting a lot of that too. We allow fruits and vegetables to go bad on our shelves. We allow the grains to be wasted and thrown away, like the bread on our table sometimes if we didn't eat our finished bread. There's a significant amount of waste. I don't have a solution here, but what I do know is that this is causing a significant problem in terms of, for one, making sure that we have a closed, circular agricultural economy. And also, as you create waste, that is wasted opportunity. That is wasted revenue. That's wasted sales. Being able to capture that is also value add for the producers of that waste along those value chains as well. There is motivation for change. And we see that throughout the entire value chain, from farm to fork. In the gray bars, which is actually more important, is basically non-cereal crops across various major crop-producing countries of the world. Turkey's there as well. The larger the bar basically means it's fruit and vegetables and beans and oil seeds. And it basically means it's more valuable. And we find actually, and we're still in the process of this analysis, but for these different countries, the more valuable your crops, the higher the need for solutions to minimize this waste, to optimize the production process. And we also see positive correlation in terms of the adoption of precision agriculture technologies. So the use of drones, use of information technology, the use of sensor technology on the farm or in the logistics supply chain to eliminate this waste. Because if you let your crops, especially your fruits and vegetables and nuts, go bad, that's a significant loss in terms of value to the industry as a whole. So what can you do with some of this waste? Well, I think a lot of folks have figured out that, well, if you could take a lot of biomass and extract the phytonutrients. So phytonutrients is the same as plant extracts. It's really the fundamental basis of all plant-based nutraceuticals as well. So it includes everything from your carotenoids. Hope you guys can see this, but carotenoids or your tocopherols, so vitamin E's, phytosterols, polyphenols, and other, these are pretty attractive growth markets ranging from, well, little less than 5%, well above 20% compound annual growth for the demand for these ingredients. And what's driving the demand for these products differs and varies across the ingredient categories, but it's really still rooted in those same three trends that we introduced. Increasing demand for health and wellness, so phytosterols, the sterols and stanols. There's great scientific research that demonstrates the use of phytosterols and the reduction of LDL cholesterol, and that's why you find so many phytosterols in margarine. Carotenoids are also good for eye health or other health benefits as well. So we see like lutein and zeaxanthin growing and supporting the growth of the beta carotene in the carotenoid category. Tocopherols and tocotrienols, which are types of vitamin E, yes, there's health benefits, but the demand is really driven by trying to preserve the oils and processed food products in order to minimize waste and rot on the shelf as well. And that's just a snippet of the potential opportunities from that. So any companies that has plant extraction capabilities, and to zero in on that, have a lot of different opportunities that's really supported by these mega trends, and it's not expected to diminish anytime soon. Another one of my favorite ones that we do at Frost Sullivan a lot is probiotics. The microbiome, that's a big trend. There's a lot of high expectations on of the microbiome, in terms of, what is the overall health and wellness benefit of ingesting microbes or topical application of microbes in order to enhance your own microbiome sphere. Sorry, it's a strange word. I'm sure you can't translate it. But it's still a very attractive growth market, looking at 4.4% compound annual growth over the next 5 to 7 years. well, 10 years here. But in the last 10 years, it's grown at double-digit growth. We just expect it to be approaching a convergent, a maturity as well. But you cannot have probiotics unless you have prebiotics. So prebiotics are your dietary fibers and your media of which that feeds off this. But it also has a lot of direct benefit for direct consumption as well. I already mentioned psyllium as a certain type of prebiotics, but what's key here is also the growth of what we call oleosaccharides. So galacto-oleosaccharide is a very common ingredient found in infant formula that helps make processed milk more like human milk for the infant. But there's also a lot of different types of really interesting oleosaccharides that have both prebiotic benefits, immunity benefits, and also serves as nutrition for the probiotics and the microbiome as well. So there's a lot of mixed products, symbiotics products that are also in the market as well, which is the convergence, the synergy of both prebiotics and probiotics in this market as well. Of course, I didn't want to leave unless I talked about protein ingredients. It's probably the largest market. We're updating this study now, but in 2016 we estimated the market for just protein ingredients at $20.8 billion. That's a big market. Anytime you start getting into tens of billions of US dollars, that's a very significant portion of the market. But that comes from a wide source. It's dairy-based proteins, but more importantly, plant-based proteins. And that's really where we see a lot of the growth. Grain-based proteins used, glutenate to help, make some of these meat alternative products, yeast or microbial-based products that delivers the umami flavor that helps replicate and helps that finished food product taste and feel more like a meat product substitute to motivate that. And also, of course, all the legumes, lentil or soybean, that really forms the mass, the base protein, that foundational protein, all witnessing significant growth. On average, it's 6.9%, but we see most of the growth in plant-based proteins because of the drive for meat alternative products. Frost Sullivan is currently doing research in this area, really looking at the product level in terms of trends. I mean, there's other proteins as well. I mean, egg-based proteins and isolating egg-based proteins, are increasingly being explored as dairy alternatives in sports nutrition. Insect-based proteins. Yes. Insect-based proteins is a specific niche that has, I don't think has a lot of opportunities in human nutrition, but could serve as a significant contribution of protein for animal feed. To deliver meat-based as a fish meal substitute, essentially. If you're concerned about the sustainability of fisheries. Very exciting market there, and of course, algae's there, as it always is as well. Finally, I'm going to take a hard right turn away from ingredients and look at another area of the market that my team also looks at, and that is the industrial Internet of Things for the entire agriculture and nutrition market. So this is the enabling technologies that supports the production and processing of all the food and beverage we eat throughout the value chain. It includes hardware, software, and the platforms that creates, senses, collects, analyzes, and reports out big data at various levels of the value chain. So it could be and I'll go to the next one. It could be at the precision agriculture level. So this is like technologies that you would, enable on the fields or on the farm, all the way to food service, point of contact, point of sale markets. What's interesting here is that we're talking about globally, hundreds of millions or billions of US dollar size opportunities that are growing at 9.2% expected growth for all of these various technologies throughout the value chain. The rate of adoption, the penetration of adoption of these technologies throughout the world among food processors is still pretty low, especially among farmers. The big tier 1 food companies have many advanced technologies within their plants, but we still see a lot of room for more integrated technology solutions throughout this value chain. And the benefits of IoT is immense, and it will finally help solve some of the big challenges that we've been talking about for decades, including maybe finally from the industry, with the support of IoT, we could finally have a harmonized food safety information system. I know we've been talking about that forever, with the use of labels and claims and regulations, but maybe if we just had proper information and software that was shareable across the entire value chain, we can bypass potentially the need for government support to help the industry help regulate itself to ensure that harmonization. Big data analytics, I've already talked about the potential benefits and the opportunities there. There's a lot of companies that produces a lot of data, but these companies have no idea the value of that information that they're developing and producing. So products like data as a service or software as a service or food safety as a service is becoming top of mind as well, and valuable to decision makers, your peers, upstream or downstream or in other industry sectors. And I guess the one last point I'd like to make on this is rapid detection methods. Again, it's a great story of industry convergence. The advances that we see in healthcare and DNA, protein analytics being applied for addressing a key unmet need in the food and beverage sector, and that's ensured food safety. So rapid detection methods, that's basically able to just take snapshots of the microbiome of the food products throughout the value chain, and if there's any change, it'll get kicked out. So a lot of amazing things going on in the biosensor space or DNA-based assay space that's really has the potential to be a significant benefiting factor for all industry participants in the value chain. All right, so I always like to close on a couple points. There's a lot of words here, but I'll be respectful of the time. Again, I would like to focus on we are still in the process of going, well, let me restate that. The demand for green food, vegetarian food, vegan food is strong still, and we actually expect that to be a major driver throughout the value chain. Meat producers, dairy producers, egg producers will have to become more creative, of course, in terms of balancing this and projecting their value proposition to consumers, because that fight is yet to be won. The green alternatives, it's a perception. I'm not saying I'm for or against. I'm just saying that there's a perception that still needs to be overcome. And the plant-based, natural, organic is winning. It has a very strong, nice proposition because it's aligned with those mega trends we talked about. Consumers want good, clean food. That's at the end of the day. But what's also interesting is that, and this is specifically related to food and beverage-based products, fortified food and beverage products or functional foods, we actually expect to see some decline or softness in the market over the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not including nutraceuticals or dietary supplements in that. I'm exclusively looking at using a food or beverage platform to deliver nutritional ingredients. We saw a significant decline in US markets. We're starting to see that in other parts of the world. It's still very strong and preferred delivery platform for nutrition in Asia. But we do expect there to be softness from today over the next year and beyond. But despite that, there's always going to be a demand for novel ingredients that delivers benefits that goes beyond nutrition. Whether it's health related or safety related, there's still a strong demand from the consumer for substitutes for sugars or substitutes for high salt alternatives. So there's going to be some interesting research coming out from the food science world that helps address some of these unmet needs. A couple other points I like to make is, cooking at home. We're finding that especially among millennials and younger, people are starting to want to cook again. You may be surprised for me to say that, but the use of microwaves are going to be probably, faux pas. No one's going to want, it's declining. I think it's driven by economic concerns and security concerns, health concerns, but we do expect that the demand for food at home, grocery sales, not processed, but processing your own food at home and cooking your own food and consuming your own food, this trend will grow over time. And it will be enabled by companies like Amazon, who delivers customized meal kits that does a lot of the cutting and a lot of the work for the consumer of these products, who just have to put it in a pot and cook it. Really interesting. And this will all be enabled, of course, by innovative technology. Anyways, one last thing I like to make, and I won't hit on all these points, is I just want to reiterate the fact that while consumers may change their preferences and the way they eat or consume their health ingredients or their products or how they achieve their healthy lifestyles, there's still going to be a growing demand for a solution, whether it's through a nutraceutical or a beverage or other platform. There's still going to be a strong need. And the best way to understand, the value to consumers is to really look at what consumers are going to try to avoid, and that's the burden of reduced quality of life. And if you can quantify that burden of life, or that burden on the quality of life, and effectively communicate that to consumer, they will adopt preventive regimens a lot faster. If you can demonstrate that economic argument. One last point, of course, is expand globally but look locally. Some of the biggest customers or biggest companies in the world have grown successfully because they are able to monitor their local conditions better than anyone else in the competition. You don't see a lot of examples of major global food companies that's able to do that. But with big data, with enabling technologies, with IoT solutions, I would expect even companies based here, small companies based elsewhere, with that technology to be able to compete with the big guys in the long run as well. So with that, I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone's opportunity and time. I'd be happy to take any Q&A as well. Yes.
Thank you. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz.